MotorWeek is made possible by Rock Auto, Tire Rack,
the latest incarnation of the plastic fantastic. Speeding your way next on MotorWeek.
MotorWeek, television's automotive magazine, with your host, John Davis.
Hello and welcome to a MotorWeek special. I'm glad you're with us because we're doing something different this week, spending an entire show with just one car. And not just any car, of course, but what else but this long-awaited 1984 Chevrolet Corvette. This is the first completely restyled Corvette since 1968 and the first totally re-engineered Vette since 1963. Over the years, it's got a number of major facelifts and a lot of powertrain changes. But the new Vette still has a lot in common with the first one, made way back in 1953. The new version is still a two-seater only, with a body made of rustless fiberglass, and is still the only true sports car made in America. Over the next half hour, we'll take you to where the 1984 Corvette is made and tour its new high-tech chassis. Pat Goss will join us with tips for owners of older Vettes. And Joyce Braga will be our guide for a review of 30 years of Corvette history. Naturally, our goldenrod gets a complete road test too. But first, let's take a closer look at how the latest plastic fantastic evolved. By late 1977, the decision had been made. The next generation of Corvette would retain the front-engine, rear-drive configuration of all previous cars. There had been some mid-engine prototypes built, but they failed to have enough power to match the Corvette's brute force image. These are early sketches from mid to late 1978. They show a targa-topped coupe with large clamshell hood. Both are key features that made it all the way to the final design. Full-size clay models were made in 1979, all showing that the new design would be more of an evolutionary rather than revolutionary change from the current car. Except for minor front and rear end details, styling was locked up for production by the end of that year. By early 1980, the stylists and engineers were working on providing a big V8 and lots of passenger space without destroying the desired super slick shape. The end result, the 1984 Corvette is 2 inches shorter in wheelbase, 8.8 inches shorter overall, and has 1.1 inches less height. But it's still 2 inches wider and 250 pounds lighter than the 1982 Corvette. All that work meant that the new car was introduced so late that there is no 83 model. The graceful sloping fenders and 64-degree windshield provide 24% less drag than last year's car. But inside, there's much more driver-passenger shoulder room and luggage space, real drawbacks in previous cars. Bags are now loaded through a single-piece frameless hatch instead of the doors. But once the single-piece top, no more T-roofs, is loaded, cargo room is again greatly reduced. An optional see-through glass top can also be ordered. Even the fuel filler door was carefully designed with an integral cap holder. Slick styling continues with retractable halogen headlights. To keep the desired hood profile, they rotate 167 degrees. Integral driving lamps and turn signals take up all the traditional grille space. The front opening hood, reminiscent of Jaguar XKE's, is the largest single piece of fiberglass ever molded for a production car. It not only reduces squeaks and rattles, but houses ductwork for engine air and a pair of carefully styled work lights. The engine compartment, well laid out for service, is done up in ultra-high-tech fashion with a finely sculptured magnesium air cleaner and a pair of finned valve covers. Chevy even had Delco change its battery colors from patriotic red, white, and blue to silver and black so everything would match. And most powertrain items have a 3-year, 36,000-mile warranty. Although the standard tires are highly regarded Eagle GTs, most owners will probably go for the optional new Goodyear Eagle VR50s. Developed from Formula One race-only rain tires, they have a unidirectional tread and full rubber depth, yet are rated both for 40,000 miles of wear and sustain speeds of over 130 miles per hour, a first. The optimal tire wheel package features wider cast alloy rims on the rear for 4 distinct tire wheel combinations. The single directional fins provide extra cooling to the 4-wheel disc brakes. The interior is spacious, but watch out for the high door sill, awkward for both pants and skirts, and the narrow passenger footwell. Although the standard cloth-covered bucket seats are extremely comfortable and supportive, a multi-adjustable super seat can also be ordered. Leather is offered only with the base bucket. A tilt telescoping steering wheel resides before a fully electronic dash. It features liquid crystal bar and numerical displays for both speedometer and tach. 4 small digital readouts surround a bar-like fuel gauge. The 4, depending on how the driver sets a group of switches, read oil pressure or temp, voltage or coolant, instantaneous or average miles per gallon, and trip odometer or range. Whatever happened to needles and dials? The standard stereo radio has fine fidelity, but for an extra $900 you can get the ultimate Delco Bose AM/FM cassette unit that features 4 speakers, each with its own 25-watt amp, custom matched to the car's interior shape. The large bulge facing the passenger was originally intended for an airbag. It contains no glove box, but there's ample storage in the center console armrest and in 2 very deep floor pockets located behind the seat. Look for that bulge to be replaced with some form of storage compartment before too long. You get all this and more enclosed in one of the most handsome bodies to ever grace the American road, and a car that as a total package sets a high standard of overall design for sports luxury cars of all persuasions. After the engineers and the stylists finished their jobs, it was the turn of GM's assembly division. They're making a mammoth effort to reproduce designed-in quality by the tens of thousands. The 1,300 workers who build each car are the real heroes of the Corvette story, and their morale is high. You can see it in this employee-designed patch. They're the ones with the ultimate responsibility to build each car right the first time. And that's just what they're trying to do at GMAD's Bowling Green, Kentucky assembly plant, the 3rd home in 3 decades for the Chevrolet Corvette. We were the first outsiders allowed into this ultra-modern 1 million square foot facility since production began. During the long '84 model year, between 25 and 37,000 new Corvettes will be produced. That's 1 new Vette every 4 minutes. Now, that might sound like a lot, but it's only a 4th as fast as some cars are built. In fact, a lot of care is needed to build the '84 Corvette. Almost 40 hours is required from the time the 2,145 individual parts meet the assembly line and the finished plastic fantastic rolls out the door. In the beginning, an automated robot welds the Corvette's unique birdcage uniframe. The structure, made of 2-sided galvanized steel, first takes shape in a garage-like welder that employees have dubbed Pac-Man. Here, 140 of the over 1,200 welds are made. Assembly points are slowly heated to 60% of desired temperature. That removes enough of the zinc coating so a final blast of energy assures a strong weld. 6 other American-made robot welders with names like Speedy, Blinky, and Clyde complete 120 inches of MIG welding, all under the watchful eyes of human controllers. From here, frames are dipped in rust protectors, then moved to a special car track conveyor. On this small closed loop, 6 reinforced fiberglass panels are attached using precise fixtures. The panels make up the rear uppers, firewall, clamshell hood, floor pan, and doors. Randomly selected units are checked on 3 surface plates. Here, inspectors can monitor over 150 frame tolerances and 160 body points for proper panel gaps and fit. Once the full circle of the car track is completed, units are hoisted back onto the body line. And next comes the clean room for painting. Corvettes require 14 hours for exterior finish, all for 2 coats of primer, 2 sprays of color enamel, and 2 clear coats for extra protection and luster. After each coat, a trip through the 250-degree oven is in order for proper baking. While all the actual paint application is now done by hand, some robot painters will be making an appearance before the model year is out. Cars are also masked extensively to prevent underpanel paints from marring the exterior finish. and they don't just touch up any flawed panels. An imperfect panel, whether a small headlight door or the huge hood, is completely sanded down and refinished. While all this is going on, the chassis and other sub-assemblies are also being readied. The L83 engines arrive fully assembled from another plant. After air conditioning and emission equipment is installed, all engine electrical circuits, including the electronic fuel injection, are carefully checked. The '84 Corvette is the first car to use a plastic transversely mounted leaf spring in the front suspension as well as in the rear. Installation is through a mechanical bender. The aluminum control arms as well as the disc brake assemblies are then attached with computer-controlled wrenches. This produces far more exacting tolerances than you can get with the older torque fasteners. And each operation is stored in the computer's memory for future potential problem solving. The front suspension hardware then joins the engine line for attachment, along with the transmission, final drive, and rear spring and brake components. Overhead and ground level conveyors are now moving other sub-assemblies, including tires and wheels and completed seats, towards body or chassis installation. One of the most critical of these sub-assemblies is the fully electronic dash. Once the customer-selected radio is installed, the entire unit is checked for proper functioning, including a simulated running of the liquid crystal gauges. Since there are as many as 17 wiring harnesses in each car, troubleshooting has to happen here. The dash will join many other components on the body trim line. All the glass is fixed by hand, including the first factory-installed openable rear hatch on any Corvette. Once the passenger compartment is sealed, it gets an online water test. With an inspector inside each car, the body is subjected to a 4-minute, 1,000-gallon deluge to check for leaks. This is only the first of 2 leak tests. Once a passing grade is achieved, the body drops down for final mating with the chassis, a process that doesn't go unremarked by the workforce. But as the assembly line finally ends, the checks and balances are only beginning. Each completed car first moves to a tow-in pit, where alignment is checked at a simulated speed of 35 miles per hour. Since they can't drive every car onto a highway, further road testing is done through a 60-mile-per-hour roll test. Not only is the drivetrain checked for proper functioning, but tests are also made for interior noise and correct brake proportioning. But to ensure that all cars come off as designed, units are selected at random and moved to the audit section for a 100% going over. The audit process is highly competitive between assembly plants. With the rank and file looking on, a good verdict by the plant manager Joe Delario is well received. Extensive worker involvement in the audit program provides proper fixes to even the most minor assembly problems. And there they are, a breathtaking array of finished products. A common sight with 650 cars in process at all times, and all of them are on their way to dealers within 72 hours of completion. While waiting for shipment, though, they're kept locked away from prying hands and watering eyes. When you've owned a lot of Corvettes, you manage to learn more than a thing or two about the legend. I happen to own a '78 Vette myself, but the real expert is our resident mechanic, Pat Goss. Since he's owned quite a few over the years, that makes him more than qualified to give Corvette owners some practical advice. Pat?
Oh boy, John. You know, tonight we're talking about one of my loves, I guess you would say, Corvettes. You know, I've had, over the years, 43 of these in one form or another. Well, in owning that many Corvettes, the things that I have learned are primarily things that you don't do with Corvettes. Now, one of the big things that you don't do is something that really looks good, at least to a lot of people, and that is to put big, wide tires on the back of them. See, there's really no problem putting this beastly oversized tire on the back of a Corvette because most times you'll have enough clearance around the fender well and so on. You don't really have to modify much of anything. But what happens to the car itself? Well, this oversized tire, this fat tire, can really be disaster when it comes to the mechanics of the rear end of the car. First off, you have to realize that the tires that come on a Corvette are generally pretty good size. Now you take this one that you're going to put on here, this big one, it has to be accompanied by an offset wheel. Well, what does that do? That moves the tire farther out, and it makes the rear suspension of the car so that there's a tremendous amount of strain on all of the parts under here. Bottom of it tends to tip out, the top of it tips in. Well, the first thing that suffers is right here, this strut rod. It has rubber bushings in the ends of it, like this one, and it doesn't take very long to destroy these rubber bushings, such as we see in this strut rod. Well, you know, it doesn't cost a lot of money to fix this, so it really isn't something to get totally excited about. But over here, this is a little different. This is a part that you probably won't recognize unless you look at this end of it, right here. This is a stub axle, and this is where the wheel attaches. Well, what happens to this? Really quite simple. So you have two bearings. This one only has one at the moment, and we'll see why in a minute. These bearings have an abnormal amount of stress applied to them by the big tires, and they suffer. As a matter of fact, generally what happens is they run dry, and the end of the axle seizes, and it breaks off like this. That can be expensive. Oh, one other thing with this. These bearings on this stub axle need periodic servicing. They have to be packed with fresh grease at a maximum of every 30,000 miles. One other thing that suffers, right here, this is the differential. See, this differential can be seriously damaged as a result of these big tires. Over a period of time, everything in here is stressed and strained, and finally it lets go, and you wind up with something like this. The whole end is broken out of this differential, and believe me, that's expensive. Last but not least, right here, this is the rear spring in the Corvette, and all late model Corvettes have this fiberglass reinforced monoleaf spring. Really works quite well. But when you change to the big tires, you change the stresses on it, and during acceleration, that spring can break. And believe me, that will give you a thrill as you're stepping on the gas. So remember, the Corvette is an expensive car, and they can be an awful lot of fun. But playing around with oversized tires can also result in a lot of expensive repairs.
Like any real star, the Corvette naturally has its own fan club with over 10,000 Corvette groupies. They probably know more trivia about the 30-year legend than the folks do at Chevrolet. But you don't have to be a Corvette owner to keep up with 3 decades of Corvette fact and fiction. To help you do that, here's Joyce Braga with highlights of yesterday's vets.
Thanks, John. The Corvette story naturally begins with this baby, the 53. They made 300 of them, and you could get it in any color you wanted, as long as it was polo white. Now, the engine was called the Blue Flame 6, and it was rated at an underwhelming 150 horsepower with a 2-speed automatic transmission. And you also got a leaky top and snap-on side curtains. Things started getting more serious with this 56 model. This was Vette's first major facelift. It got these exposed headlights and sculptured side panels. And what do you know? Real windows. You just remove the hard top, crank down the windows, and take off with up to 240 V8 horsepower. In 1958, this was the biggest change, dual headlamps, and they were a 50s trademark. And then they put on a louvered hood, and inside a 160 mile-per-hour speedometer, and you needed it with a 290 horsepower engine. By this time, the Corvette was becoming a real performance car. Then there was 1963, a favorite year for Corvette owners. First, this was the only year for that split rear window, and second, this was the year of the Stingray. All kinds of new things went into the Vette this year. New styling with arched fenders and revolving headlamps. And the engineering was improved too, with independent rear suspension and one-piece knockoff wheels. You'd have to say that with the Stingray, the Corvette finally began to handle like a true sports car. This body style lasted until 1968, when the familiar Coke bottle shape came in. The 68 Vette had bulged fenders and a T-top, and that lasted for the next 15 and a half years. In the 70s, the Vette got rubberized bumpers and some interior restyling, among other things, and they also stopped making a Corvette convertible in 1975. Right here, we've got a 78 model. This was the year they added the fastback body style. And that was also the year the Corvette was the Indianapolis 500 pace car. But we've got one more. This is the last major revision of the basic Corvette before this year. This is a 1980 car with functional front and rear spoilers. But the chassis on this car is basically the same as the 1963 car. And partly because of that, Chevrolet decided it was way overdue for a total redesign. So, what does the new chassis look like? Here's John with the answer.
Thanks, Joyce. The 84 model is obviously much more than just a pretty face. The new chassis isn't all that radical, but for a mass production model, it does constitute a daring assemblage of high technology. So let's return to Bowling Green for a detailed look under the skin.
Once the assembly line came to a halt, we sought out a completed chassis for a thorough look at many of the most talked about features of the new Corvette. Working from the front, the 5.7-liter twin throttle body fuel-injected engine sports a single accessory drive belt. A spring-loaded tensioner constantly adjusts for belt stretch and should make belt replacement simpler. Chevrolet feels it solved the screeching belt noise prevalent in other such systems. The Corvette is actually a mid-front engine design. The power plant is mated behind a bolt-on frame crossmember. That allows a compact power rack and pinion unit to be installed on the Vette for the first time. Attached to the engine's underbelly is the fully independent front suspension. It includes a stabilizer bar and a lone fiberglass reinforced leaf spring. Outward, you find a conventional short hopper, long lower set of A-arms that are made of very unconventional forged aluminum. Arms and knuckles like these are normally only seen on megabuck racing-only machines. The front spindles are offset 1/2 an inch rearward for better handling response and directional stability. The exhaust system begins with a revised stainless steel manifold for a better flow that's less back pressure than last year's design. Tucked onto the power plant's rear end is either a 4-speed automatic or a Doug Nash-developed 4-speed manual with an electric overdrive in the top 3 gears. This 4+3 stick automatically goes into overdrive at steady speeds. Only cars made for export have a manual overdrive lockout. The automatic or the manual with a hydraulic clutch are all attached to the posi-traction rear with an aluminum C backbone frame for added chassis stiffness. The engine, beam, and rear end attached to the uniframe at 4 rubberized isolation mounts. The prop shaft is made of either aluminum or steel, depending on how the car is optioned. Also in the rear suspension is a single transversely mounted plastic spring that replaces the multi-leaf steel spring used prior to 1982. But the rest of the independent rear is all new, with a very complex 5-link forged aluminum design. The 4-wheel disc brakes mark the first time that GM has gone out of house for such a system. Called Slimline and made by Gerlach of Australia, they use a single-cylinder caliper that's finned for low drag. Japanese-made semi-metallic pads grip 11.5-inch vented discs. Around back, the dual exhaust goes through a single converter and ends with twin mufflers, each with a pair of stacks. So even if you don't see it, you know you've heard an 84 Corvette.
And the price for all this careful design and engineering? Well, $21,800 to start and $26,600 for the most expensive version. That's $3,000 less than the experts expected and about half of what it would cost to buy a package of similar features and performance somewhere else. So at least if you can manage to afford one, the 84 Corvette is a bargain. But okay, we know it's slick looking, we know it treats passengers with style, and contains some of the most advanced components of any car. But is it really worth all the fuss? Well, only a trip to the test track will tell.
And the first thing it told us? Well, handling of the 1984 Corvette is extraordinary. Its flat, fast transit of our slalom was the quickest of any car we've tested. I recently drove a prototype Vette through the high bank turns of California's Riverside Raceway. Even at near full throttle, I felt surprising security. The hard feel, 2 turns lock-to-lock steering fits the car's potential perfectly, and the car seems to be grafted to the driver. Makes you feel that telekinetic steering just might be possible. Even in the higher speed avoidance tests, the optional Z51 handling package that includes the wider rear rims makes this a car that just about anyone could drive with more confidence than sense. While the twitchy steering and flyaway rear end of the old car is gone, the new car is definitely more handler than most owners will be drivers. They'll have to be satisfied in being told that they possess the best handling production car ever made. With a top speed of about 138 miles per hour, you might assume that gearing would sacrifice low-end acceleration. But you've got 205 horses at 4,800 RPM and 290 pounds of torque at only 2,800 RPM. That gives you a hardly slow time of 7.9 seconds dashing from 0 to 60. And swinging around slower traffic or getting out of a tight emergency should prove easy with a 40 to 55 passing time of a scant 3.8 seconds, even with a noticeable lag in our car's 4-speed automatic. And from a standing start with quite a bit of smoke, a 500-foot sprint came in at 8 seconds and 61 miles per hour. Quarter mile time, 15.8 seconds at 89. Not the fastest of any car you can buy, but definitely in a very small fraternity. Stops were also sure and smoky, with panic distances from 55 miles per hour registering 110 feet. Indeed very short, but requiring a lot of pedal pressure. The VR50 tires grip so strongly that only a few tries would flat spot their soft rubber tread. That's a normal event with most ultra high-performance tires. The stiffer suspension was harsh on expansion joints, so for everyday driving, most owners will be happier with the standard setup. Sound good? Well, there's more. At 55, we recorded 74 decibels of mostly exhaust rumble with no wind racket around the removable top. And last but not least, fuel economy. With an EPA rating of 16 city and 28 highway, our test average of 20 was 1 mile per gallon better than the last of the old Vettes we tested a year ago.
And our final judgment, well, you can probably tell by now that we think the 1984 Corvette was well worth waiting for. Despite some minor flaws, it's the best combination of everything a performance car should be, no matter where it's made or at any price. You have to say that if it's representative of Detroit's advanced thinking for their more pedestrian models, then the future looks good for the American automobile industry. We'll see you next week on MotorWeek.